It's pretty well known at this point that the MCU has not done too well with quite a few characters in its roster. The biggest and most popular one that they fumbled has to be Spider-Man. If you go online anywhere, it's pretty obvious that people don't love Tom Holland's version of the character. To be fair, this doesn't seem to be a shared opinion with general audiences though, because all three of his movies have been extremely successful. Very successful. So it really comes down to why. Why is it so popular to hate this version of the character? And even more specifically, there seems to be one movie that everyone seems to focus on, and that's Tom Holland's second Spider-Man movie in the MCU, Spider-Man Far From Home. It's considered online to be the worst maybe Spider-Man movie, and well, general audiences loved it, giving it a high 90s score on Rotten Tomatoes, and it made over $1 billion at the box office. So who's right? Should we hate Spider-Man Far From Home? Should we love Spider-Man Far From Home? Today I rewatched the movie for the first time in almost 5 years. That's insane. How is that even possible? 5 years? Hi, I'm a big Spider-Man fan, but you probably know that at this point. If not, go watch this video or this one or any of them. I love Spider-Man, and MCU Spider-Man is no exception. Kind of, sometimes. I love him a little less. I was hyped after Civil War. Homecoming was fine, but flawed, and I was left fairly disappointed with Spider-Man after Infinity War and Endgame, but then came Far From Home. At the time, and I do still kind of stand by this, I really enjoyed the movie. I thought it was a ton of fun and had some great moments, making it a pretty decent superhero movie. Too bad it's meant to be a Spider-Man movie though, because even back then I could tell you that this movie did not understand how to make this about anything other than Iron Man and about anything that isn't Spider-Man. Now back then I cared less and I was much more of an MCU shill than I am now, but I've grown up. Cape shit isn't my favorite thing anymore. I still love some of it. I can't lie. And this one's a good time, so no spoiler warning. It's been almost 5 years. Let's just get into Spider-Man Far From Home. Immediately the movie lets us know what we're in for in this Spider-Man movie by opening up with Nick Fury and Maria Hill and talking about Endgame, because obviously this movie was going to have to be that Endgame follow-up. And while I do like seeing some of this here, like the consequences of the snap or the blip or whatever you want to call it, I do wish that it wasn't in our second Spider-Man movie in the whole MCU, but it's fine. I can get over that. Also, Sandman shows up and Mysterio, but neither of them are real anyway, so what does it matter? Then we make fun of all the actors who didn't renew their contracts, and Peter and Ned have a field trip coming up. Simple enough story. Also, for some reason now, Peter is madly in love with MJ, or Michelle, Zendaya, when he barely interacted with her in the last movie, but that's fine. They're teenagers. Also, we're just completely gonna gloss over one of the most important character building moments in Spider-Man's life, and that's Aunt May finding out that Peter is Spider-Man, because she found out at the post-credit scene of Homecoming. What the but in this movie, she just doesn't care. They just resolved it off screen, I guess. I don't know. I don't like that, but it's fine, I guess. We get a reference to Tom's spider senses, or
Peter Tingle. Please do not start calling it my Peter Tingle.
yeah, not calling it that, which is cool because those were completely absent from his first few appearances in the MCU. Also, a small reference to Uncle Ben, which makes no sense, especially after No Way Home. And pretty quickly now, we're in Europe. This movie is very fast-paced, and there's a lot going on all the time. We're constantly moving to different locations, and I love that. It's a lot of fun. It's a good change-up for Spider-Man, especially when he spends most of his time in New York City. I do wish that Tom Holland's Spider-Man spent a little more time in New York City, but I guess we're getting 6 movies, so hopefully we see that in one of these next 3. And honestly, you can just tell the movie's having fun, and that's one of the biggest parts of these first 2 Spider-Man movies in the MCU, and that's the childlike tone that they have, where in this movie they are juniors in high school, but they're still kids and they act like it, sometimes too much, and they do go overboard at times and start acting a lot younger than they are, but for the most part it's pretty consistent with how high schoolers act, and I like it. Ned and Betty are together for literally no reason in this movie, but I get it. I'd fall into that Ned leads Riz too. Also, Brad Davis, who is from the comics, kind of, is just a weird side story character in this movie.
Classic MJ, right?
Most of the stuff between Peter and Zendaya here isn't great, and I remember enjoying it a lot more a few years ago, but honestly, that's my biggest complaint so far. The chemistry is great, but the story doesn't feel real between them. It just doesn't feel that important, and most of the stuff is played off as more of a joke than anything else, but other than that, I'm really enjoying the movie so far. And pretty quickly, we get introduced to the real main course of the story in this movie, and that's Peter's struggle between being Spider-Man, the superhero, and being Peter Parker, the normal teenager. And I think they try to use the Tony Stark stuff stuff as kind of the basis for why he wants to be a normal kid and everything that happened in Endgame, and that's fine. I just don't love that Iron Man is somehow the main character of this movie, and we'll get to it more, but even the villain of the movie is an Iron Man villain who is basically only fighting Spider-Man because Tony's dead. And speaking of the villain, Mysterio, Jake Gyllenhaal, he does a great job throughout this whole movie because when he's introduced, man, I really like him, and I like how he interacts with Peter and Fury, and it's all great. It's so good. Also, all of the Nick Fury stuff, or Tallow, I guess, I don't care. Secret Invasion was mid. Anyway, all of the Nick Fury stuff in this movie is just so passable and boring, and it really holds back what should have been a great Spider-Man movie. I mean, come on, this is our first Mysterio, one of the best Spider-Man villains in my opinion, and he doesn't really do Mysterio stuff too often in this movie, which is a shame, but I will say this action sequence with Mysterio and Peter working together to take on Hydro Man is cool, really cool, and I love it. A lot of the action with Mysterio in this movie is fun. It looks great, which I guess is what you want with Mysterio. I even really like the one later with Molten Man, even more so, because if you're really paying attention, yeah, that whole thing is fake, really fake. It's especially clever how they don't even show a lot of that fight towards the end, just hearing it and listening to Mysterio's monologue, because listening to it's pretty much the exact same thing. It's cool. More of that, please. Less of this. I don't want all of this I have to be the next Iron Man stuff, especially when it's something that everyone watching knows isn't gonna happen. I mean, I think we were all pretty sure the MCU was never going to make Spider-Man the next Iron Man, but then we get to one of my favorite parts of the movie. No, not that. I mean, Ned is a player, but I mean this really good character building between Peter and Mysterio here. I feel like the manipulation that Beck does on Peter is really well written and super obvious after you realize it's happening, which is great. That's fun. And then his turn after Peter leaves is amazing. Jake Gyllenhaal is way too good of an actor for the MCU, and he shows that off completely in this scene. But now we get to my only real gripe with Beck in this movie, and that's that Tony Stark has to once again be super involved in this movie because he needs the Tony Stark glasses to do his super evil plan, which is, I don't know, be the next Iron Man, because fuck, Marvel just can't move on, I guess. And I don't really feel like I've talked about it enough because, yeah, it's a little rushed, but I do really like the relationship between Peter and MJ. Yeah, it's rushed and it's not really done great justice in this movie, but I really love the chemistry between Tom Holland and Zendaya. I mean, but what I don't love is just how once again we have someone finding out Peter is Spider-Man and just not caring at all. MJ finding out should be something. Aunt May finding out should be something, but nobody seems to care. It should mean so much when Aunt May finds out that Peter is Spider-Man that he's been lying to her. It should mean something, at least something, when MJ finds out that Peter's been lying to her, but no one in this movie seems to care at all, which is so frustrating to say the least. But all of that negativity aside, John Watts decides to cook one of the most perfect Mysterio sequences ever. It's amazing, it's mind-bending, it has comic callbacks, and it's genuinely intense. I love it. You can really feel how in the dark Peter feels throughout this whole thing, with Beck just taunting him in the background, which just feels so Mysterio. It feels like the animated series from the 90s. It all feels so perfect. But also, Mysterio becomes a lot more basic in the second half of this movie, but for the most part he's still cool, just a little less cool than he was before. Also, Train. At this point in the movie, Peter is beat. He's extremely beat. He's empty, he's destroyed, and he has nothing. All because he trusted Beck. All because he trusted someone else. Tom Holland's Peter Parker is extremely gullible, and I feel like he learns that lesson in this movie, and then for some reason needs to learn it again in No Way Home, but we're not talking about No Way Home today. In this movie, it's a good lesson, it's a great story, just not enough of this. Not enough Spider-Man, not enough of Peter Parker learning life lessons that turn him into a hero. And honestly, I really do love the scene when Happy picks Peter up and finally tells him that he will never be Iron Man. This is important. It shouldn't even be needed to be mentioned, but I guess it does, and it's a good scene when it is mentioned. But the issue is the movie literally forgets that conversation ever happened 3 minutes later, because we get this Iron Man foreshadowing scene complete with Led Zeppelin playing in the background. Are you kidding me? I really want to believe that John Watts wanted to make a Spider-Man movie here, trailer, and Kevin Feige just really wanted one more Iron Man movie. But come on, this in particular, this scene is so extremely tone deaf, it's insane. But now we have our final battle in London. I don't even know where to start, really. There's a lot going on, and I could care less about a lot of it. The Maria Hill rocket launcher stuff is happening, and I just could care less. Honestly, none of what's happening here is that interesting, except for this. Wow. This looks great. This looks amazing. This is so Spider-Man. I love this suit, too. I might be the only one, but I like the look a lot, and his movements feel very Spider-Man-like throughout a lot of this sequence. Even the final confrontation with Beck has such a great payoff for all of the Peter Tingle sense stuff. But man, does what could have been such a great villain go out with such a whimper. I just don't really love anything with Mysterio in the second half of this movie. He's fine, but just I feel like they kind of let him down from the third act onward. But honestly, chills right here. This is so great. Also, love, how sweet. Also, Ned. And you know what? As the movie closes, I realized that I really did have a fun time rewatching it, and it's really hard to call this a bad movie, and I feel like the people that do are just hating on it to hate on it, but it's also really hard to call it a good Spider-Man movie. That briefcase from earlier, you know, the one that seems to be Peter's only connection to Uncle Ben, you know, the most important person in his life, well, yeah, that exploded, and Peter nor May even care or acknowledge it, and that's just one of many times that this movie forgets that it's Spider-Man Far From Home. But for the most part, this is a good movie, even a good superhero movie, just not a good Spider-Man movie. And it's genuinely, I would have to say, one of the worst Spider-Man movies. He doesn't really feel like Spider-Man for most of it, probably because he's not, which is so annoying because Spider-Man Homecoming showed us that Jon Watts knows how to do young Spider-Man, and even No Way Home showed us that in some weird way, Jon Watts knew what he was doing with Spider-Man, but this whole movie feels like a miss, man. It just feels like a miss. So yeah, I can see why a lot of people hate this movie, but I can honestly also see why so many people love it, because if you just turn your brain off and just enjoy yourself, this is a great movie with a really good story that will leave you smiling, you know, until that post-credit scene. Anyway, I'd give the movie a pretty decent 76%, which, yes, I know is higher than I gave The Amazing Spider-Man, which is very clearly a much better Spider-Man movie, but quality-wise, this one does have it beat, which is the only reason it has a higher score. If you take away the Spider-Man, this is a fairly fun movie, but you shouldn't have to do that in a Spider-Man movie. That's ridiculous. I had fun watching it, but it's just, it's fine. It's really, really fine. It's on the lower echelon of MCU movies, where the fact it's decent, it's watchable. So yeah, that's about it for this video. Sorry for the longer break I took. I've been working on some stuff, but I have some really good videos coming soon, so stay tuned. Bye.